Chapter 39. Dawn broke over Atlanta, painting the sky in shades of coral and gold. Isabella stood on the balcony of their new home, a secluded property at the city's edge where forest met civilization. It wasn't far from the compound where they stayed after confronting Victor. Her bare feet relished the texture of smooth cedar planking, warmed by the first rays of sun. After the night's celebrations, the air carried the scent of pine and damp earth, clean and crisp in her lungs, with subtle undertones of wildflowers and the distinctive woody musky scent that marked this as pack territory. She wrapped her hands around a steaming mug of coffee, black with a hint of cinnamon, the small ritual of normalcy that had remained in her transformed life. The porcelain warmed her palms as the rich, spicy aroma curled upward with the steam. Her fingertips traced the mug's rim, her gaze distant as she watched the light spill across the treetops, illuminating dewdrops on unfurling leaves. The house behind her, their house now, was modern yet rustic, all exposed beams and glass, designed to blur the boundary between inside and out. Perfect for a lichen alpha and his human mate. She could feel the cool morning breeze flowing through the open concept space, carrying the mingled scents of their life together. Leather-bound books, the lingering notes of last night's wine, the sandalwood soap Mikhail preferred. Mate, partner. The words still felt new on her tongue, though no less accurate for their novelty. She tested them silently, her lips forming the shapes without sound. "You're up early." Isabella didn't startle at Mikhail's voice behind her. She had sensed his approach. She turned to face him, taking in the sight of him in the dawn light, wearing only loose pajama pants, his muscled chest bare, dark hair tousled from sleep. The scar over his heart, the one that never fully healed, caught the light. A silver-tinged reminder of battles past. His skin seemed to glow with a subtle warmth in the morning light, highlighting the defined muscles that spoke of inhuman strength contained in human form. "I couldn't sleep," she admitted, her voice carrying that slight morning huskiness. There was too much. Everything. She gestured vaguely with her free hand. He moved to stand beside her at the railing, his body radiating warmth in the cool morning air. His movements carried that inhuman grace she still found fascinating, each step calculated and efficient, silent, despite the wooden planking that would have creaked under most human weights. Regrets? The question was casual, but she caught the flicker of uncertainty in his eyes. Not one. She leaned against him, feeling his arm encircle her waist automatically, his touch both possessive and gentle. His solid weight beside her felt like an anchor in a world still spinning with new sensations. "But I have questions. Many, many questions." Mikhail chuckled, the sound rumbling pleasantly against her. "I would expect nothing less from you, my prosecutor." His accent caressed the words, making them sound almost like an endearment. "Ex-prosecutor," she corrected, though without regret, her shoulders relaxing in a way they rarely had during her career. "Never. It's who you are, how you think. That mind of yours is a weapon more dangerous than claws." His fingers traced a pattern at her waist, a gesture both absent and intimate through the thin silk of her robe. Isabella smiled into her coffee, the expression softening her usually serious features. The steam bathed her face in momentary warmth as she inhaled the rich aroma. Flattery will not distract me from my questions, Volkov. It was worth an attempt. He kissed her temple, his lips lingering momentarily, his breath warm against her skin. Ask then. The howl last night, my reaction to it, the prophecy. She ticked each item off with decisive staccato precision, her penchant for organization showing. Pick any of those to start. She fixed him with that penetrating gaze that had made countless witnesses confess. Mikhail sighed, his arm tightening slightly around her waist. I had hoped for at least one morning of peace before destiny intruded. A wry smile tugged at his lips, though his eyes remained serious. Destiny? Isabella turned to face him, searching his expression with the intensity that had made her reputation in the courtroom. That sounds ominous. Not ominous, merely significant. He gently took her coffee mug from her hands, set it on the small table nearby, and then led her to the cushioned bench against the balcony wall. They sat facing each other, his larger frame making the space feel more intimate rather than crowded. The soft cushions yielded beneath them, still carrying the faint, pleasant smell of the new fabric. The bond we created last night is ancient magic, he began, taking her hands in his thumb tracing the line where the ceremonial cut was already healing. The warmth of his skin against hers sparked that now familiar current of connection. Older than the packs as they exist now. In the old world, it was sometimes used to connect human families to wolf protectors without the danger of transformation. So I'm not turning into a werewolf? Isabella asked, only half joking. Number. The bond does not change your fundamental nature, but it creates a connection that allows you to perceive aspects of our world, to sense pack bonds, to feel the moon's pull, though less intensely than we do. His expression grew more serious, the weight of centuries evident in the subtle lines around his eyes. The morning light caught in his irises, revealing flecks of amber that human eyes would miss. Isabella nodded slowly, her brow furrowing slightly as she processed. I noticed some of that last night. It was like suddenly having a new sense I couldn't quite interpret. She leaned forward slightly. Like hearing colors or tasting sounds, experiences that shouldn't fit together, but somehow did. It will become more natural with time. Mikhail's thumb traced circles on her palm, his touch gentle but grounding. But in your case, there may be additional effects. Because of the prophecy? She tilted her head slightly in a questioning manner, dark eyes sharp and attentive. Partially. He seemed to choose his words carefully, weighing each before speaking. The blood I shared with you is not ordinary werewolf blood. The alpha bloodline carries power accumulated over generations. Isabella studied his face, noting the subtle tension in his jaw. And that matters because... She drew out the question, giving him space to explain, while making it clear she expected a complete answer. Because you are not an ordinary human. His eyes held hers, intense and searching. Your mother's unsolved murder, the case that drove you to become a prosecutor. I am certain you've wondered about the strange circumstances. Isabella stiffened, her spine straightening as it always did when her mother was mentioned. The cushions creaked beneath her as she shifted, her posture suddenly rigid. How is that relevant? Her voice cooled, taking on an edge. The file described ritualistic elements that made no sense to police. Symbols drawn in blood. A missing heart? His voice gentled, recognizing her pain. Isabella, those were signs of a power transfer ritual. Your mother was killed by someone seeking power she possessed, power that would have passed to you naturally upon her death. What are you saying? Isabella pulled her hands away, standing abruptly. She began to pace. The wooden planks of the balcony creaked rhythmically beneath her bare feet, marking her agitation. My mother was an elementary school teacher from Puerto Rico. She wasn't involved in magic or supernatural business. Mikhail remained seated, giving her space. His posture open but patient. A gentle breeze ruffled his dark hair, carrying the scent of pine and distant wildflowers. Many supernatural beings live human lives, especially those with mixed heritage. They often don't know what they carry in their blood until something awakens it. Isabella paced to the railing and back, mind racing, her hands making short, emphatic gestures as she processed. Her silk robe fluttered with each turn. So, you're claiming my mother was... what? A witch? A lichen? Disbelief coloured her tone, though not as strongly as it might have months ago. Neither. Something rarer. Mikhail's voice remained calm, a steadying counterpoint to her agitation. In the old stories, they were called luminari, humans able to perceive and sometimes channel supernatural energies, mediators between worlds, judges when conflicts arose between different beings. Isabella pressed her fingers to her temples, her breathing carefully controlled. This is insane. I would have known if my mother was some kind of supernatural mediator. Would you? You were 13 when she died. And such abilities often remain dormant until adulthood, or until contact with supernatural power awakens them. His eyes followed her movements, watching her process with the patience of centuries. Isabella stopped pacing, a terrible suspicion forming. The rising sun cast her shadow long across the balcony, stretching toward Mikhail like a physical manifestation of her doubt. Did you know this when we met? Is that why you were drawn to me? Her voice dropped to that dangerous quiet her colleagues had learned to fear. Mikhail stood then, crossing to her in 2 swift strides, his movement carrying that preternatural speed that still sometimes startled her. Number, I suspected only after we connected, when you saw through Victor's disguise, based on emotional resonance rather than physical appearance. His hands framed her face, his touch gentle but insistent. The scent of his skin enveloped her. Isabella, I loved you before I understood what you might be. The bond last night would have connected us regardless. She searched his eyes and found only sincerity. Her tense shoulders relaxed incrementally, her hands resting against his chest, feeling the steady, slightly slower than human heartbeat beneath her palms. But the prophecy. The historian seemed to think our bond fulfilled some prediction. The old texts speak of a time when the ancient bloodlines would reconnect, werewolf royalty and luminary judgment, separate for centuries, coming together to face a greater threat. His thumbs brushed her cheekbones gently, a soothing gesture. I never gave it much credence. Prophecies are notoriously metaphorical. And now? Her question was direct, characteristically cutting to the heart of the matter. Now I wonder. His gaze was contemplative, ancient knowledge swimming in eyes that had seen centuries pass. The morning light revealed subtle variations in his irises, flecks of gold within the blue, shifting like autumn leaves in water. The howl you heard last night came from no ordinary wolf, nor any werewolf in our territory. Something about it felt ancient, primal, and you responded to it on an instinctive level. Isabella leaned into his touch, processing. Her mind worked methodically through the implications, sorting, categorizing, and connecting, as she had done with the case evidence for years. So, the bond between us may have awakened something dormant in me, something from my mother's bloodline. Yes. The single word carried weight, certainty. And if that's true, I might have abilities beyond normal human perception. Abilities that connect to this prophecy. Potentially. Isabella pulled away, returning to the railing to gather her thoughts. The rising sun had fully cleared the horizon, golden light spilling across the forest canopy, casting long shadows across the valley below. Below their balcony, morning birds flitted between branches, their songs creating a complex symphony that seemed more distinct, more meaningful than she remembered from previous mornings. You know, she said finally, a hint of her dry humor returning. Most couples spend the morning after a handfasting talking about honeymoon plans or what to make for breakfast, not ancient prophecies and latent supernatural abilities. She heard Mikhail's quiet laugh behind her before his arms encircled her waist, his chest warm against her back. We were never going to be most couples, he murmured against her ear, his accent thickening slightly. His breath sent a pleasant shiver down her spine. Isabella leaned back against his chest, her hands covering his where they rested at her waist. No, I suppose not. There was acceptance in her tone, perhaps even satisfaction. They stood in comfortable silence for a moment. A red-tailed hawk soared over the valley, riding thermals, its cry echoing between the hills. The scent of coffee mingled with pine and morning dew, creating a fragrance that seemed to embody their new life together. I should be freaking out, Isabella said eventually. Finding out my mother might have been some kind of supernatural judge, that I might have inherited abilities I don't understand. It should terrify me. Her brow furrowed as she examined her reaction. But it doesn't. Mikhail's question held no surprise, as if he had expected this response from her. She turned in his arms, her face tilted up to his. Oddly, no. After everything we've been through, it feels like one more piece of a puzzle falling into place. I always felt something was missing in the explanation of my mother's death as gang violence. Some reason it happened that made no sense in a normal context. Her hands rested against his chest, feeling his steady heartbeat beneath her palm. Mikhail tucked a strand of hair behind her ear, his touch lingering. Your instincts have always been remarkable. Pride colored his words. So what happens now? She asked, straightforward as always, her head tilting in that questioning angle. Do I just wait for magical abilities to manifest? Start seeing auras or something? He smiled, the expression softening the usual gravity of his features. I suspect it will be more subtle than that. The Luminari weren't flashy magic users. Their power lay in discernment, seeing truth beneath illusion, and connecting different worlds. That sounds suspiciously like what a good prosecutor does, she noted wryly, her lips curving into a smile. Perhaps that's why you excelled at being a district attorney. His expression grew more serious, his eyes holding concerns, and he was still measuring whether to share. But we should be cautious. If your abilities are awakening, others may sense it. The supernatural world has been without luminary judgment for generations. Some will welcome it, others will fear it. Isabella sighed, raking a hand through her dark hair. And here I thought we were done with death threats and assassination attempts. Welcome to life with an alpha werewolf. Mikhail's smile didn't quite reach his eyes. Safety is never guaranteed, but protection always is. Isabella straightened, squaring her shoulders. I don't need protecting. I need understanding. If I have these abilities, I need to learn to use them properly. There are texts in the Pack archives. An Ilara of the Fae might know more. The Fae kept closer connections to Luminari historically. Then that's where we start. Isabella felt a familiar determination settle in her chest. The same focus that had carried her through law school and into the DA's office. Knowledge first, action second. Mikhail studied her face, his expression softening with something like pride. You adapt remarkably well to challenging situations, Isabella Santos. I've had practice lately. She glanced down at her left palm, where the thin cut from their blood-sharing ceremony had already begun to heal. The line was fading from angry red to pale pink, warm to the touch but no longer painful. Is this why you chose a blood bond instead of the traditional bite? Did you suspect what might happen? No, he answered honestly, no hesitation in his response. I chose it because I wanted you as you are. Fierce, human, untamed by wolf instinct. The bite changes more than just physical form. It reshapes thinking, instinct, priorities. His hand covered hers, pressing gently against the healing cut. I wanted partnership, not dominance. The simple truth of his words warmed her more than any elaborate declaration could have. Isabella reached up, threading her fingers through his dark hair to pull his face down to hers. Her typical reserve melting into unexpected tenderness. Show me, she whispered against his lips, a flash of the vulnerability she rarely displayed. His kiss was answer enough, deep and thorough, his arms tightening around her as he lifted her effortlessly. Isabella wrapped her legs around his waist, letting herself be carried back into their bedroom as the morning light spilled through the open balcony doors, transforming the room into a golden sanctuary. Oh, they fell onto the rumpled sheets together, hands seeking skin, breaths quickening. The Egyptian cotton sheets were cool against her heated skin, a sensual contrast to Mikhail's warmth. Isabella felt the now familiar heat of desire, but also something new, a resonance between them that amplified every touch and sensation as if their connection existed on multiple layers simultaneously. I can feel what you feel, she gasped as his mouth traced fire down her neck, her analytical mind momentarily overwhelmed by sensation. Their bond seemed to pulse with each heartbeat, creating echoes of pleasure that rebounded between them. The bond, he murmured against her skin, his accent thickening with desire. It connects us in all ways. Clothing fell away beneath urgent hands. Isabella arched beneath him, reveling in the weight of his body against hers, the controlled power in his movements. The silk of her robe whispered as it slid to the floor, forgotten. His eyes flashed red briefly as she scraped her nails down his back, not with anger, but with passion barely leashed. Let me see you, she whispered, hands framing his face, her gaze direct and unflinching. The real you. He hesitated, understanding her meaning. Isabella. Concern flickered in his eyes. Please. She held his gaze steadily, no fear in her expression. I want all of you. Something shifted in his expression. Vulnerability beneath the desire. Slowly he closed his eyes, and when he opened them again, they glowed ruby red in the morning light. The sharp points of his canines extended slightly past his lower lip, and his features sharpened and became more predatory, though he remained mostly human in form. His scent changed subtly, becoming wilder and more primal. Isabella traced the contours of his face with gentle fingers, wonder rather than fear in her touch. Beautiful, she whispered, and meant it. She felt rather than heard his surprised intake of breath. In the 6 months since she'd discovered his true nature, she'd grown familiar with his wolf form and even come to appreciate its savage beauty. But this halfway state, this blending of man and beast, was rarely seen by human eyes. Most werewolves, she'd learned, considered it their most vulnerable appearance. Neither fully human mask nor powerful wolf, but the exposed truth of their dual nature. A sound rumbled in Mikhail's chest, part growl, part moan, as he claimed Isabella's mouth. Her lips parted, inviting him in, a flick of her tongue meeting his. His kiss tasted of herbal tea, honey, and promise, and her response was immediate. Her body molded itself to his, her curves fitting against the angles of his physique. The rushing noise in her ears intensified, and she realized it was her blood, pumping urgently beneath her skin. Isabella trembled as Mikhail's hands roamed her body. His fingers burned her skin with the intensity of their need, igniting her nerve endings. Their bond sang with the depth of their longing, and she could feel how much he ached to possess her, to merge with her entirely. And she wanted the same. With a deft motion, Mikhail untied the belt of her robe, his movements efficient yet unhurried. The silk parted, sliding off her body and onto the floor. The air felt cool against her heated skin, her nipples tightening, and Isabella reveled in Mikhail's gaze on her exposed form. His pupils dilated, rimmed with red, and his eyes glinted with a predatory hunger that aroused her further. She was unashamed, her confidence coming as easily as her desire. Mikhail divested himself of his clothing, and Isabella was afforded a glimpse of that beautiful hybrid form she so rarely saw. His body was a work of art, augmented muscle and sleek contours, with his wolf's eyes and fangs adding a dangerous allure. Desire pooled in her core, liquid heat, and she could feel his answering arousal through their connection. His scent intensified, that wild musk that heralded his semi-shifted state, sparking her shift in smell and taste. When his arms closed around her again, it was sensation overload. His skin against hers, amplified by the vibrations of their bond, sent arcs of pleasure shivering through her. She could hear his heart pounding, feel the hunger that consumed him, and knew he experienced the same from her. Their mouths found each other's again, even as their hands continued to explore. Tongues tangling, he urged her toward the bed, and she went willingly, needing the mattress's support as her knees weakened. He lowered her to the sheets, and for a moment his eyes drank her in, glowing ruby red in the morning light, brimming with passion and possession. Isabella ran her hands over his shoulders' warm, velvety skin, feeling the ripple of muscle beneath, the brush of his fur-like body hair. Arching her back, she urged him closer, needing the press of his body against hers, needing the anchor of his weight. He obliged, covering her body with his, sliding against her in a perfect fit of limbs and desire. She gloried in the feel of his skin sheathing hers, his hardness seeking out her softness. Isabel abandoned herself to the sensations, the heat, and the needs. She rocked her hips against him, the friction eliciting a gasp, her nails scraping down his back, leaving marks that would heal almost instantly. He growled, a rumble that vibrated in his chest and buzzed against her hypersensitive skin. The feel of his fangs raking gently down her neck almost sent her over the edge, but she held on, craving more. "Mikhail," she breathed, hands tangling in his hair, urging him to take her. His response was to nip at her earlobe with fanged teeth before suckling the sensitive spot beneath her ear, sending delicious shivers down her spine. One hand roamed downward, fingers expertly stroking her wet heat until she bucked against him, crying out his name. And still he continued to play, even as her body begged for completion. Isabella's head thrashed on the pillow, her breath coming in harsh pants. "Please," she begged, needing the fulfillment only he could provide. Mikhail, his eyes glowing, a mix of desire and adoration, shifted to position himself at her entrance. With a gentle thrust, he entered her, and Isabella arched off the bed, crying out his name. He stilled above her, giving her a moment to adjust to his size, his length filling her. Then, with exquisite slowness, he began to move, withdrawing and thrusting in a languorous rhythm that made her keen with need. The velvet steel of him rubbed against hidden spots inside her, sparking pleasure that emanated outward, intense and all-consuming. Their bond throbbed with their joining, amplifying each sensation. Isabella dug her nails into his shoulders, needing to be closer, to merge with him entirely. She felt him smile against her skin before their mouths fused again in a desperate kiss. Their tongues mated as their bodies did, tasting, exploring, ravenous. Their rhythm built, becoming more urgent, their passionate symphony accompanied by the music of the sheets rustling and their moans of pleasure. The bond between them was alive with sensation, a pulse that mingled with her heartbeat and his. It was as if 1,000 electric filaments connected them, and Isabella revelled in its intimacy. With each thrust, Mikhail hit that perfect spot deep inside her, and the tension coiled tighter within her. She was distantly aware of the sun on her skin, the breeze teasing their heated bodies, the senses too alive, and the ever-present bond pulsing in time with their movements. Then, with a flick of his hips, he sent her spiraling over the edge, crying out as her body seized around him in waves of completion. Mikhail thrust a few more times, his release imminent. Isabella's name fell from his lips like a plea, and she exerted the last of her strength to caress him, her touch urgent. He joined her in completion, his body shuddering, their essences merging as he collapsed against her, still joined as one.